When my neighbor said, "There were candles and people crying in your hallway," I thought it was a joke. I had been out of state. No one was supposed to be inside. But the locks weren't broken. The house was clean. Too clean. And when I checked the footage from my hidden cameras, I found something I'll never unsee. Strangers chanting in my bedroom, my mother filming it, and my sister handing out brochures. This wasn't a visit. It was a business. And it was built on my silence. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever been betrayed by your own family, you'll want to hear what happened next. I wasn't supposed to be back that night. My return flight from Seattle had been delayed, and I was scheduled to land the next morning. But my last client meeting was cut short, and I quietly caught the earlier flight without telling anyone, not even my mother. I'd barely slept in 48 hours, and all I wanted was to crash in my own bed, shower off the airport grime, and drink something that hadn't come from a vending machine. When I pulled into my driveway in Charleston, everything looked ordinary, except for the faint flicker of light behind the curtain upstairs. I paused, keys in hand, heart kicking against my ribs. I live alone. No one had a reason to be inside, but the locks weren't tampered with, and nothing was broken. I told myself it was probably a motion-sensitive lamp I forgot to unplug. Still, I unlocked the front door slowly, with the kind of stillness you reserve for waking a stranger in the dark. The air inside smelled like lavender and lemon oil. I don't own either. The floors gleamed like they'd been freshly polished. There were no signs of a break-in, and yet I felt like an intruder in my own space. That's when I saw it. A long, trailing shadow moving down the hallway, not quickly, deliberate, calm, like someone taking their time leaving a room that didn't belong to them. I stepped back, then forward, then froze again. But there was no sound. No creak. Nothing. I checked every room, each one spotless, staged, eerily perfect. My bed was made, the pillows fluffed, the wine glasses were rearranged. My entire spice rack had been alphabetized by someone who apparently thought oregano came before basil. None of it made sense. And yet, no damage, no theft. I should have felt safe, but I didn't. The next morning, I ran into Jordan, my next-door neighbor. He's a retired firefighter who now spends most of his time restoring antique cars and watching the neighborhood through a pair of binoculars he swears are for birding. "Hey," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "Thought you were still out west?" I paused. "Just got back last night." He frowned. "Then who was in your house Tuesday night? And the night before that?" I stared. He continued. "There were people, Kimberly. Lots of them. Cars parked out front. Candles in the window. I thought it was some kind of memorial until I heard the music. Chanting. Soft crying. Didn't seem right. I tried to laugh it off, but my mouth was too dry. I told him thanks, that I'd look into it, and went straight back inside. I didn't know what scared me more, that he was right, or that I already had a sinking feeling who had the keys. My family. But this time, it wasn't just overstepping boundaries. It was something darker, something calculated, and I needed to find out what they were really doing in my house before they returned. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, walking through my house like I'd just inherited someone else's life. Nothing looked stolen, but it didn't feel right either. My couch had been moved 2 inches to the left, just enough to leave a dust outline. The hallway mirror was wiped clean, not just of smudges, but of fingerprints entirely. My pantry, once a chaotic mess of tea bags and protein bars, now had everything in perfect rows, brands grouped together, labels forward, like a showroom. I opened the refrigerator. Someone had replaced my almond milk. Same brand, same size, But the expiration date was 2 weeks later than mine had been. There were new eggs. Not expired, not used. Just new. And not mine. I hadn't even realized how well I knew the subtle imperfections of my own kitchen until they were gone, replaced by a version of my life where someone else had taken charge of the smallest details. I sat down at the kitchen island and stared at the untouched fruit bowl. The apples were polished. I don't polish apples. That's when I checked the front door again. Deadbolt locked. Chain intact. No scratches. Same with the back. All secure. The locks weren't broken, but something was. My trust. And not just in the security of my home, but in the assumption that my house was ever truly mine when I wasn't in it. I'd had a key hidden in the gutter behind the mailbox. Old habit from my college days, just in case I lost mine on a run. I went outside to check. It was gone. No stone out of place. No scratch marks. Just gone. Taken cleanly, thoughtfully. That narrowed the list. No stranger would have known where to look. Only family. Only someone I once trusted. So I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, chipper. "Kimberly, I was just thinking about you. How is Seattle?" "Fine," I said. "Quick question. Did you stop by the house this week?" A short pause. "Well, I may have dropped by to water your succulents. You always forget them when you travel." "And did you bring anyone with you?" Another pause. "Just your sister. She wanted to grab a book you mentioned. I hope that's okay? And the group therapy session? The chanting? Was that part of it too?" Silence. Long and low. Then, "Kim, don't be dramatic. My neighbor saw everything. There were people. At night. In my house." "You're being paranoid," she said, and suddenly her tone cooled. "You travel so much, honey. The house sits empty. We were just using the space. It wasn't hurting anyone. You didn't ask. You would have said no." That was her answer. Simple. Final. She would have gotten her way either way, so why bother pretending I had a say in any of it? I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Then I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed 4 words into the search bar. Discreet home security cameras. It was clear now. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being outmaneuvered. And, whatever my family was doing behind my back, they were careful enough to clean the floors, but not careful enough to cover their tracks. So I bought 5 cameras. Compact, cloud-connected, audio-enabled. 1 for the kitchen. 1 for the living room. 1 in the hallway. 1 in my home office. And 1 discreetly tucked into the bookshelves in the bedroom. I installed them that night, then booked another short client trip to Atlanta. 3 days. Just enough time to test my theory. I sent a text to my mother the night before I left. "Off to Atlanta tomorrow. Please don't stop by. No guests, no cleaning. I mean it." She replied with a smiley face and a thumbs up. But I didn't feel reassured. I felt like I'd just set a trap. The first day I was gone, nothing happened. I checked the camera feeds from my hotel in Atlanta after dinner, half expecting to see something out of place, half hoping I was just imagining things. But it was quiet. My house remained still, just how I left it. The only movement was from the automatic cat feeder I'd set up for the neighbor's tabby I was temporarily watching. Still, I didn't relax. The second day, around 6:17 p.m., the front door opened. My mother walked in. Alone at first. She wore the same linen wrap she always traveled in. Wide sleeves, natural fiber, too much sage in the pattern. She watered the succulents, hummed a little as she rearranged the couch pillows, and paused briefly to admire a framed photo of me on the mantel, which she then moved half an inch to the right. That should have been the end. But at 6:41, another woman entered. Not my sister. Not anyone I recognized. Mid-40s, long red braid, holding a small basket of what looked like bundled herbs. She didn't knock. She moved like she knew the layout, like she'd been there before. By 7:03 p.m., there were 6 people inside, 3 women, 2 men, and my sister. She arrived last, with a yoga mat and a portable Bluetooth speaker. They dimmed the lights. Someone lit candles. And then the chanting started. Soft, low, rhythmic. It echoed from the living room into the hallway where I'd installed one of the audio-enabled cameras. I couldn't make out the words, but the intention was unmistakable. This was no casual gathering. This was orchestrated. At 7:18, they formed a circle around my rug, the very rug my mother once called too plain. They placed hands on each other's shoulders. They whispered something in unison. Then the crying began. Not just soft sobs, but full-body wailing. One woman fell to her knees, clutching a notebook, screaming words I couldn't understand. A man next to her held a smooth stone to his chest like it was sacred. I felt the breath drain from my lungs. My home was being used as an emotional altar, and I hadn't given a single soul permission. I watched for an hour. No one checked the front door. No one thought they were doing anything wrong. They shared stories. They burned something in a shallow bowl. They poured wine on my hardwood floor as part of what looked like a ritual. One of the men began filming on his phone, panning across the room, narrating softly. This space, it holds so much healing. The energy here is pure. Grateful to the Vance family for trusting us with this. My hands clenched the sides of my laptop. This wasn't just a trespass. It was a commercialized violation, a performance disguised as wellness. And they were using my name, my family name, to sell it. At 9:03 p.m., someone knocked over a candle. There was a quick scramble, laughter, and then my mother's voice. Let's keep it gentle. This isn't about spectacle. The irony nearly choked me. When they left around 10, they cleaned up. They dimmed the lights again, reset the pillows, took their wine bottles. My sister was the last to leave. She looked directly into the hallway camera, not at it, just near it, as if she could sense something wasn't right. But she smiled. That was the worst part. The smile. As if none of this mattered. As if it wasn't a betrayal of the very foundation our relationship pretended to rest on. I didn't sleep that night. I played the footage again. Not because I needed to, but because I couldn't stop. I scrolled through the camera app, documenting timestamps, logging faces. I even reverse searched one of the women and found her LinkedIn. Grief coach, trauma consultant, certified in energy healing. And I found the site, the one they used to book these sessions. It was slick, elegant, muted greens and golds. No names. Just phrases like transformational space in historic Charleston and available select weekends. Submit inquiry for availability. There were photos. Photos of my living room, my bathroom, my kitchen island with my teacups, now staged with lavender stems and affirmation cards. And the contact email? v.m.circles@protonmail.com. My mother's initials, Vance Marlene. Circles. I had given them an inch once, years ago, when I said they could water my plants. Now they'd taken the entire house and turned it into a spiritual Airbnb for people who wanted to scream into my rugs and heal on my hardwood floors. I didn't know what would hurt more, the exposure or the silence if I did nothing. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to stay quiet. I flew back early without warning. Landed on a Tuesday instead of Thursday. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jordan, who always waved when he saw me pull in. I wanted to see it for myself. Not just on camera, not from a screen. I wanted to walk through the house as it was, untouched by my hands, but arranged by theirs. The moment I stepped inside, the air smelled like eucalyptus and rosewater. I hated that I knew those scents now. I walked from room to room in silence, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was the kind that hums behind your ears when you know something's deeply wrong. In the guest bathroom, there were folded towels I didn't own. In the linen closet, there were extra yoga mats stacked behind my winter coats. In the dining room drawer underneath a pile of trivets, I found a lockbox labeled Participant Waivers, signed, stamped, initialed. One of them had Brielle's handwriting at the bottom. She wasn't just in the room, she was in charge. I found a notebook next. Handwritten notes. Ritual instructions, themes, speaker cues, recommended emotional prompts. It was all dated, all organized, all part of a program. My house wasn't a home, it was an itinerary. And each room had been curated with intention. Every mirror wiped not for dust, but to reflect back whatever emotion they wanted the guests to see in themselves. My own bedroom had been turned into something else. The throw blanket on the foot of the bed wasn't mine. Neither were the meditation stones arranged carefully on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall, trying to picture my sister's face the last time she'd visited. She'd hugged me, told me she was proud I'd built something stable, then helped herself to the layout. My mother didn't text. She showed up. Around 6 p.m., just as I was thinking about calling my lawyer, she walked in like it was her own house, keys in hand, wearing that same linen wrap. "You're home early," she said, smiling like I'd caught her rearranging the spice rack, not operating an unlicensed grief retreat. "We need to talk," I said. "Let's not do this," she replied gently. "Don't make this a thing." She walked past me toward the kitchen, her sandals silent against the hardwood. "We were helping people, Kimberly. Your sister is struggling. You weren't using the space. It just made sense." I followed her, but she never turned around. "You trespassed. You monetized my home. You exposed strangers to a space you had no right to offer." She turned then, just enough to raise an eyebrow. It was therapy. No one was hurt. I stepped forward. "You don't get to decide what's harmless in someone else's house." That's when she said it. Soft, low, lethal. "I didn't think you'd find out." And in that moment, I understood everything. It was never about helping. It was never about healing. It was about what they thought they could get away with. I didn't confront them in person. There was no shouting match, no family intervention, no attempt to salvage what had already been turned to ash. Instead, I sat at my desk, filed quietly through months of surveillance clips, screenshots, guest lists, and emails, then handed it all to someone who wouldn't flinch. My attorney, Tess. She didn't ask why my own family would do this to me. She'd seen worse. Her only question was, "Do you want to file civil or criminal first?" I chose civil. Not because I wanted money, but because paper trails last longer than outrage. We filed for trespass, unauthorized commercial use of residential property, and emotional distress. I attached my neighbor Jordan's affidavit, time-stamped footage, and the marketing emails I'd baited my sister into, forwarding to an alias. Within 2 weeks, city zoning officers issued a formal warning. My property was no longer eligible for short-term rentals or spiritual use without permit. That meant everything they had built, if you could even call it that, was dismantled. But it didn't stop there. Once local officials began cross-checking tax filings and permits, inconsistencies unraveled like loose thread. Brielle had reported retreat income as family donations. My mother hadn't reported hers at all. The IRS was notified. So was the state board that regulates therapeutic practices. Turns out you can't run emotional healing circles without licenses or consent from the homeowner. They didn't see it coming because they thought I wouldn't go that far, that I'd stay quiet to keep the family peace. But peace built on erasure isn't peace, it's performance. Brielle eventually called, not to apologize, but to rage. She accused me of betrayal, said I'd humiliated them, ruined her progress, destroyed her platform. I listened. Then I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. By the time the cease and desist letters arrived, the circle had disbanded. The healers vanished. The website was scrubbed. Friends they used to invite to dinner stopped answering their calls. My mother sent a letter, handwritten, long, no apology, just a plea. You didn't have to go this far. But I did, because they had. I moved out quietly, sold the house through a private agent, left behind the rugs they cried on and the shelves they rearranged, bought a small adobe home in New Mexico, further than they could reach, quieter than they could manipulate. I never needed a courtroom with a judge and a gavel. I just needed consequences that stayed. In my new house, the keys sit in a drawer I barely touch. Not because I'm careless, but because there's no one else to give them to. No mother dropping by to water plants, no sister who needs space, no father acting like presence entitles him to access. It's quiet here, not the kind of quiet that makes you feel forgotten, but the kind you choose, protect, and keep sacred. I planted wildflowers along the fence line last week. No one rearranged them. No one moved my tools or wiped down my counters without asking. Everything stays where I leave it. That's the difference between peace and pretending. For years, I told myself I was being generous by staying silent. That family needed grace. That boundaries were optional if someone claimed good intentions. But the truth is, they weren't confused. They were counting on my silence, and I gave it to them for too long. They used my house like a stage, rehearsing a version of life that left me out entirely. And when I asked them to stop, they didn't apologize. They begged me to lie for them. I didn't. I won't. And I don't feel guilty. I never changed the locks again because I didn't need to. No one else got a copy. No one else earned the right. People think betrayal ends in screaming, but it doesn't. It ends in stillness. It ends when you stop explaining. When you stop opening the door, hoping someone will finally respect what's on the other side. I didn't get justice to punish them. I got it to protect the one person they always overlooked. Me. And I sleep better now. Because silence, the real kind, isn't empty. It's earned. What Kimberly's story teaches us isn't just about locks and lawsuits. It's about boundaries. Real ones. The kind that aren't made of wood or metal, but of self-worth and clarity. Too often, especially in families, we're told to bend for the sake of unity, to forgive violations in the name of love, to keep peace even when it costs us ourselves. But when help becomes control, and healing is just a cover for manipulation, it's not selfish to say no, it's survival. Kimberly didn't retaliate with rage. She responded with restraint, evidence, and unwavering clarity. Her story is a modern parable for anyone who's ever been gaslit by people who claim to care. The betrayal she endured wasn't loud. It was slow, calculated, and disguised as support. That's what makes it relatable. Because so many of us are taught that family means unconditional access. But here's the truth. Trust isn't inherited. It's earned, and it can be lost. Kimberly's strength came not from revenge, but from reclaiming her space, her voice, and her right to peace. She didn't need to win in public. She needed to protect herself in private, and she did. The fallout wasn't theatrical, but it was permanent. That's real closure. In a world that often pressures us to forgive for appearances or keep family secrets for comfort, this story is a quiet revolution. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful statement isn't a confrontation, it's the refusal to continue participating in the lie. Forgiveness may be noble, but boundaries are necessary. Kimberly didn't burn bridges, she simply stopped rebuilding ones others had already set on fire. How to get started today. Reflect on one place in your life where you feel taken for granted. Write it down. Change one small access point. Reclaim a password, say no to an unreciprocated request, or stop justifying a boundary. Start documenting your space and your time, not because you're paranoid, but because clarity is power. Have you ever felt manipulated under the label of family? Share your story below. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read. Like, comment, and subscribe for more true-to-life stories about boundaries, betrayal, and silent strength.